Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and another video. Today I'm really excited to be painting an otter in watercolour for Dena Tollefson's Underwater Art Challenge, and thought this would also be the perfect opportunity to test out and give you my first impressions on this 6 set of blue watercolour half pans from Daniel Smith. I bought this set from Jackson's a while back when they had a sale on, and I've been itching to use them. So as much as I'm not ready to do a full review on them just yet, I can share my first experiences with you in today's painting. Before I started, like I do with any new watercolours, I swatched out each of the 6 colours in my sketchbook to see how they laid down and looked once dry and so on, and I'll be talking to you more about all of that as well as some of their individual and unique properties a bit later on, so I hope you enjoy the video. For my materials, in addition to the Daniel Smith palette, I'm also going to be using 2 additional watercolours from Winsor and Newton's Professional range, Sepia and Yellow Ochre Light. I also have a masking fluid pen and have picked 3 round paintbrushes, a Sepia Gold 2 size 10 and 2 silver black velvet brushes in sizes 4 and 8. I'll be painting on Archer's 100% cotton cold press paper that I've cut down to an 8x10 inch size, and with 2 jars of water and some paper towels we're good to go. This time I was looking for a reference image where I could paint not just under the water but the surface too, so this otter photo fitted the bill nicely. I started off by taping my outline sketch onto my watercolour paper and taping around it with Scotch Magic tape to get a nice white border. You'll also notice that I'm securing just the corners of my paper today, as I want to see if it allows the paper to expand more when wet, without buckling as much. So we'll see how that goes. Before I began with the painting, I also masked out the otter's claws using my masking fluid pen, as it will make painting the background a lot easier if I don't have to paint around them. Now, whilst that's drying, I'm going to mix up the watercolours I want to use for the background. I made up a watery mix of sepia and yellow ochre for the lightest part of the otter's fur. Then I went in and got some lunar blue from the palette and some Sodalite Genuine, and these really wet up beautifully. Then I went straight in to my paper and used my size 10 brush to pre-wet it before dropping in any paint. And I spent a good few minutes doing this to make sure that it was evenly wet and the water had soaked into the paper before I then started applying the first of the 2 colours, which was the lunar blue. My idea was that I'd let these mix and bleed out onto the surface of the wet paper. And both of these are granulating colours, so I was really interested to see what sort of effect I'd get on the paper today. I tried to go in really boldly, and these colours are super pigmented, so that wasn't too difficult. I also dropped in some of the turquoise. Then, whilst the paper was still wet, I went in with some sepia and painted in loosely the front paw. I wanted a really soft edge here, so I wanted to paint on wet paper, but I didn't want it to bleed out too much. I used the same sepia paint on wet paper to paint in the first layer of the otter's body and soften the edges with a clean damp brush. I also lifted up some of the areas within the turquoise paint that I painted in to give that kind of light reflection look. In this set of 6 half pans, 3 of them are actually non-staining, including the turquoise and the lunar blue, as well as the cerulean blue. The indigo is a medium staining pigment, the Sodalite Genuine is low staining, as is the Payne's Blue Grey. I next moved on to the area around the otter's neck, and for this wanted to do it quite loosely and drop in a mixture of turquoise and sepia and let the colours bleed together on the surface of the damp paper. I also used some of the colour that I'd mixed up at the beginning with the yellow ochre and the sepia. I continue this on the other side of his body in the same way. I'm not putting any detail in yet of fur or direction of fur. I just wanted to lay down a first loose wash. And whilst this is drying, I'm then going on to paint the area of the otter's body that's above the surface of the water. This is really light in my reference picture, as is the water behind him. And to make it a little bit more green, I add in some yellow ochre. I'm working on damp paper again here, as I don't want any hard edges. And I'm still using my large size 10 brush. So with the first layer complete, I dry it off with my hairdryer. And then I decided I wanted to go in and darken up the foreground, so the area of water underneath the otter. I used the same method, so pre-wet the whole of the area first and then dropped in some of the Sodalite Genuine. With that drying, I then moved on to the otter's head and switched up to a slightly smaller size 8 brush. I did pre-wet the paper first, but didn't cover the area completely, so that when I dropped in paint, I'd get a mixture of hard and soft edges. And at this point I am starting to look at the shape and direction that the fur is growing in, and just using short strokes working towards the centre of the face. I also used the same sepia paint to outline the eyes, before then moving on to the nose. Here I switched over to using the Payne's Blue Grey. This is another really beautifully rich pigmented colour from the Daniel Smith set, and being that it's not granulating and semi-transparent, I thought it was perfect for the otter's nose. For the eyes, I moved down to my smallest size 4 brush and use it right on the tip with some indigo paint. The indigo in this set is absolutely amazing. It is so dark and rich, and it looks practically black in its neatest form. It was really ideal for the pupils in the otter's eyes, and I used it also to outline the outside of the iris as well. This colour, along with the Payne's Grey in the Daniel Smith set, are non-granulating, so they are perfect for those really tiny detailed areas where you want a really smooth flat colour. Now I'm going in with a dry brush and some more concentrated sepia just to build in a bit of texture onto the otter's head, and I'm going in the direction of the fur growth. Next I want to start building in some texture to the otter's neck. So for this I just use short sweeping strokes and mix in some turquoise and some more sepia. I'm pre-wetting the area of the neck here and dropping in Payne's Grey as well. I really like the fact that the Payne's Grey in this set has a blue tinge to it. So I'm just working really slowly, carefully and methodically, and just looking at the direction the fur is growing in, but trying to mix it up with some different colours and different textures as well. With that done, I then start to work on darkening up the front paw, and for this I'm using sepia and some Payne's Grey again. The front paw in the reference photo is actually a little bit out of focus, so I didn't want to concentrate too much detail here, rather more looking at the values. I used the same darker mix to fill in the otter's ears, and again using the tip of my brush just to get in some fur texture. I also start to darken up the area underneath the waterline here. And fill in some darker areas on those back legs as well. I work on wet paper to make sure that I'm not getting any hard edges, but being careful to go around the outside of the otter's face to keep that area nice and white. Next I use more of a watery mix on my brush and some more sepia and some grey, and this is just to build up some more depth to the face. Most of the colours in the set are actually transparent or semi-transparent, so I'm not too worried that I'm going to lose any of the fur texture I put in at the start. For the top part of the otter's body that's above the water, I used still very diluted paint. But after the initial layers, it's now time to start thinking about putting in some details. So I keep checking back with my reference photo to make sure that I'm working in the direction of the hair growth and being really observant with the way that the water is flowing as well. With each new thing I paint, I'm always aware that it can often make other areas seem like they need more layers too. So that's just the way watercolour works. So here I'm darkening up the area of water above the otter's back and making it look a bit more green by adding in turquoise and some yellow ochre. And then again I'm darkening up the otter's body. And bringing that same colour down over his forehead. So now I'm going to start putting a bit more detail into the water and that wave there. Painting water can be a bit difficult, but I find that if you break it down into smaller sections, it's a lot more manageable. For the darkest part of the wave, I'm using the Payne's Grey again and have switched up to the small size 4 brush. I want to get in some really nice crisp details and edges, so I'm painting on dry paper. I look at my reference photo to get the general idea of the shapes within this wave, but I don't copy it exactly. Close up you can see some of the shapes that I've put in, and also the colour of the Payne's Grey when it's diluted. For the line of the wave that comes down on this side of the painting, I've switched back to using Sepia as it's lighter here. And then I add in some of the Lunar Blue from the Daniel Smith set on this wave at the top. When the Payne's Grey is dried, I then go over that area again using a more diluted Payne's Grey, and I also drop in some of the turquoise. So with that all done, it's time to remove the masking fluid on the otter's claws. It was at this point that I kind of ran out of time to finish the painting, so I had to finish it the next day, and when I went back to it with fresh eyes, I decided I needed to darken up that area of water under the otter's body again. So I pre-wet the whole area, and then instead of going in with a Sodalite Genuine, I went in with the Lunar Blue, which had more of a teal look to it. But I was still able to pick out some of those light spots that I'd done in the first couple of layers. And this being still a granulating colour still gave me those lovely textures that I was after and had enjoyed from the previous day. Granulating paints are something that I've largely avoided up until now, as I haven't been sure on what to make of them, but I have to say I really enjoyed them, and I'm looking forward to doing more paintings with them in the future. With the background dry again, I then went in to darken up the shadow on the back of the otter's leg, And for this I went back to using the Payne's Blue Grey and just softened out the edges with some clean water on my brush. Then it was back to the claws. I'd masked them out in the beginning because I didn't want to lose sight of them, but they weren't actually white in the reference picture. So I added a light wash of indigo and sepia just to try and make them look a bit more realistic. Then it was time to add some finishing touches to the otter's face. I used some sepia paint onto dry paper to mark in where the whiskers were going to go. And then decided to use a white jelly roll pen just to put in some of the white whiskers on this side of the face. Under his chin, and on the left side of his face too. I used my finger just to smudge out and lighten up some of the bright white so it looked a bit more natural. I then went in with my Copic black fine liner. This is a 0.3, just to add in a few black whiskers too. So with that, this painting was done, and it was time to remove the tape. I think having the tape in all four corners seemed fine, but I don't think it stopped it from buckling completely. It might save on tape though. I'm really pleased with how this little guy turned out though, and I loved using the Daniel Smith watercolour pans. I especially like the effects you can get with the granulating colours, so I'm now thinking of doing a proper review on this palette in a future video. And if that's something that you'd like to see, then please pop a comment in the box and let me know. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to go and check out the other artists who've taken part in this challenge too. Thank you all so much for watching, look after yourselves, look out for each other, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!